All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Intro to Field webinar. So this webinar is geared towards students who will be starting field in their first term for the winter 26 term. So if that is not you, if you're joining field in a future term, you do not have to stay on this webinar. You can log off because we're going to hold one every semester, the semester before you start field for those of you in the residential program and for local online students. My name is Erin Kong. I'm the field director here. My background is in healthcare, so if anybody ever has any questions around medical social work, I'm always happy to answer those. And I have been in this field director role for the last 2 years now, so I'm starting my third year. And I would like to have my colleagues introduce themselves if they'd like to go next. Maybe Director Woods, if you'd like to go.
Sure. Welcome, everyone. I'm Michelle Woods, and I'm the director of the Career Services Office within the School of Social Work. So I provide professional development assistance, career planning, information about licensure, and our office helps to support students who are applying for your field placement by reviewing your documents. And we'll go over that a little bit later, but happy to be here and happy to see you all here.
And I think Assistant Director Carrington. Did I get the title right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Erin.
Of course.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Cerise Carrington, and I am the Assistant Director of Financial Aid here in the MSW program. But I'm also here not only as a financial aid representative this afternoon, but also just representing our Office of Student Services, as we realize that some of you may have questions as it relates to field placement in your particular plan, changing your plan as it relates to your program length, or potentially even your pathway. So I'm here kind of all things student services as well.
Thank you both. These are two amazing colleagues who please don't hesitate to reach out and get to know them. They're wonderful. All right, so I'm going to get started on this, and please, you can write your questions in the chat, but I will say as I'm presenting, I'm not going to moderate the chat, but I will go backwards when we do the Q&A at that time, and hopefully your questions get answered actually, so I might suggest that maybe you hold off, write yourself a note while I'm speaking, and we can always answer it at the end. So just a few announcements for this. Again, this virtual session is for winter 2026 field start students. Like I said, please save your questions. The chat won't be monitored at this time. I have enabled captions, and these slides have been formatted to support digital accessibility. So the font size and some of the color contrast has been adjusted for that purpose. Very briefly around the agenda, we're going to do kind of field education introduction. If you really don't know anything about field education, the most important maybe for all of you is talk about the field placement application process, talk a little bit about prepping for field. And then there's some additional things that always come up for field around school specialization, certification, and then end with some advice and final thoughts. And my colleagues have some additional information to share with you as well. So for field, I always just like to introduce my team. So I have two assistant directors because our program is quite large, and we're very proud of the fact that we have certainly a robust residential and local online. And when I say local online, it's those of you who are about an hour from campus, from Ann Arbor, not exact, but it's about an hour. And then we have many, many colleagues who are beyond an hour out of state. And those are managed and directed by Dr. Yatisha Robinson, and our online, she's our online assistant director, and Professor Christina Dadswell is our residential assistant director. We have amazing administrative staff, so if you ever stop in the field office, you may see one of these great folks. And then we have a placement coordinator, Claire Peterson. She does all the placements, again, mostly for out of state, because they are a bit more complicated, and so we have someone dedicated to that. And then the rest of these amazing folks are field faculty. So from Talia Ingham through the rest of these slides, these are folks, and I'm just going to flip through, who we consider the U of M School of Social Work field faculty. They are going to be the people who are listed on your registration as being the professor of record for your field placements. So some of you will do something called Social Work 515, and other people will do something called Social Work 691, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. A little bit about field education. It is a quarter of your entire curriculum here in the school. We are very proud of that. We are the experiential learning and practical application side of things. The goal really is to integrate what you're learning in classes into the field, into the community, doing real life projects, program management, seeing clients, seeing groups, creating things, contributing. I often talk to students about your own intern legacy of how you're going to leave this internship better than the way you found it. So lots of interns have lots of actually legacy projects that continue to this day in their agencies, which is really cool to hear about and to highlight. We always want to make sure that we're being clear about field placements. So we absolutely will take your interest into consideration. The goal for this office, though, with hundreds of students, is to make sure that we offer you a viable field placement that aligns with your primary pathway, can address the social work competency development that you need to graduate, and that you will gain and attain transferable skills. Field is not meant to be a first job. It is not, the likelihood that you'll get offered a job in your field placement is low, to be honest, just based statistically. There are some of your colleagues who will, but that is not the purpose of field. The field is to make sure that from accreditation perspective, you get the skills progressively, the rigor increases over time from term to term, that again aligns with your pathway. As far as the overall process, a few things here. So you're going to prepare your field application materials, which I will talk about shortly. You're going to submit your field application on time, and I'll tell you what that timeline is. You'll receive information about your first available option once you apply. Within 2 weeks, the field faculty have to go through anywhere from 60 to 80 field applications, and they'll read through your goal statements. Some of you, they may reach out to and say they have some feedback, but basically we're going through all of those materials in 2 weeks. And the goal is to send you all to your first option, to your first kind of viable, hopefully, placement by October 10th, just so that you have, if you have not heard anything by October 10th, this is also an accountability on our side. If you have not heard anything by October 10th, please don't hesitate to reach out to our field office. The additional step after this is hopefully you'll be offered an interview. If you are offered an interview, great. And if you're not, or that placement's gone, or things have changed at the field placement. So we always talk about how dynamic this process is. A lot of the field placements have signaled to my office months ahead of time that they want a student. And then, of course, as you can imagine, funding changes, there's staffing changes, there might be leadership changes, there might be, et cetera. And so sometimes when they've expressed initial interest, they no longer are able to offer a placement. So they'll let us know that, but that just means we have to move you on to the next placement. And then if you are offered the placement, we will say congratulations and here's all the things, and you'll be all set, and then you're done. You just finish your classes this term and you wait for field to start. If you're declined post-interview, it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be that just it was really competitive and they had a lot of students. It also could be that, you know, there's maybe some feedback that they'd want to give you, the reason why maybe you didn't show up as your best self, or here's some, from a social work perspective, from an interview social work perspective, here's some feedback that we would give you. It's really meant to be a learning opportunity so that you can do better and hopefully land your next interview. So we'll give you that feedback if we are given any. Sometimes we're not given specific feedback, but if we are, we're happy to share that with you. Maybe just a few notes. I get a lot of questions about if I apply for field on the first day it opens, do I get an advantage? And you do not. So I don't want anyone to feel like just because you missed the window, there's no window except for this 2-week window. You have plenty of time to apply. So there's no advantage or disadvantage kind of when you apply. The main thing to make sure that you just apply on time. That's probably the biggest takeaway. Declining too viable. So when I say viable, they align with your pathway. They're available within, you know, a reasonable distance, and I'm going to talk about that. If you decline 2 viable placement options, either pre or post interview, though, that will require a meeting with me because we just need to kind of level set expectations. But also that means you're pretty far into the semester. And so we need to start talking about timelines and expectations. And so just that's a part of our policy and part of the workflow. So please be mindful of checking your UMISH email because that's where all the communications are going to happen. And I would strongly recommend that you try to get in the habit of responding within 1 to 2 business days so that you can keep this process moving. This is around field education credits. So it can be a little bit confusing. So this slide can be here for your reference. Is if you are a non-advanced standing student, you need to complete 900 total field hours. This is a CSWE requirement. This is the lowest number. I will say we actually, and many other programs, have much higher field number requirements, but 900 hours is the minimal amount that CSWE requires. And so to get that done, what you'll do, again, this is for the folks who do not have a bachelor's degree, you're going to do 2 credits of 515, and that's foundation field. And then you're going to do 12 credits of 691 over the course of your time here. For those of you who have a bachelor's degree, you are advanced standing, as you know, so you're going to do 672 total hours, and that is the equivalent of 12 field credits here. All right, time commitment. What does that mean for you? So for non-advanced standing students, again, what you're going to look at is typically 3 terms for full-time and 4 terms for part-time. Now, lots of people sometimes extend things and there's some extenuating circumstances. I would say the vast majority of full-time students do 3 terms. They would do 1 term, the first term of foundation field 2 days a week, the equivalent of 2 days a week. You could do 2 8-hour shifts. You could do 1 8-hour, 2 4-hours. That part doesn't matter, but the equivalent of 16 hours per week. And then you go up to 3 days a week of field for the last 2 terms, so 24 hours per week. For those of you in the part-time program, a lot of you all just stretch your field out over time. So you would be doing 2 days a week for foundation and then 3 more terms of 2 days a week. So we just kind of, again, spread out those advanced field credits. And essentially you'd be doing 2 days a week of field consistently for 4 terms. For those of you in advanced standing, full-time advanced standing students typically do 3 days a week for both terms and then you're done. Or if you're part-time, a lot of folks will do 4, 4, and 4. Or depending on your schedule, actually, I know some of you are on master track, you'll do 2 days a week of field for all 3 terms. So bottom line, I know I just said a bunch of numbers, make sure you look at your course planning worksheet. That will be your source of truth. And if you need to vary from that, you should reach out to one of the program managers to connect about that. As far as what you'll do in field, again, I hyperlink some things and we're going to send out these slides to you and post the recording after this. Give me about a day for the web team to post this. So it's not going to be right after this meeting. But really it's CSWE competencies are what we're required to make sure that you leave this program understanding and applying, again, the classroom knowledge into those spaces. You're also going to be navigating ethical concerns. Definitely you will learn lots, if not already, about the NASW Code of Ethics. We really want you to practice skills and behaviors that lead to core competency development. And we just moved to the EPAS 2022 competencies. So they're a little bit updated. They highlight things around anti-racist practice and environmental justice, which is really exciting. And so we've just recently updated to those competencies. And then practice adherence to our technical standards. You all should have read and signed that upon admission, but we really focus on technical standards a lot in field. Because to me, again, it's really around kind of some of those professional behaviors and readiness to be in the field with clients and with colleagues in those spaces. I get some questions a little bit about who am I speaking about? What's the difference between field faculty, field instructor? So we're just going to go through this briefly. So you all are the first one, obviously. Field faculty will be the U of M person. This is a person that's on your Canvas site and that you're registered for. That's going to be your go-to. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, that's going to be your source of truth. That's going to be your mentor. That's going to be the person who's going to be connected to your field agency. The field instructor is the person that's at the agency itself, like at the site, right, in the community, away from the school of social work. That's your qualified field instructor. They have an MSW. They have met our qualifications. And then the final role here is called a task supervisor. Not everybody has a task supervisor, but at times there are folks involved in your field education who are not MSWs, but they're critical to the work that happens in your field. And so we recognize that role as a task supervisor. They just technically cannot be sign off on your online educational agreement because they themselves don't have an MSW. But again, we really focus on, oh, sorry, I'm not moving my boxes, field instructor and the task supervisor. But they're really integral to your learning. And so those folks are acknowledged and recognized, and they're part of your online educational agreement as well. All right, so some common questions that we'll run through. Can you complete your placement at your place of employment? I get a lot of questions around employment-based placement. Yes, potentially. So what I'll say is your employer really has to agree to a series of things, which also includes allowing you to have work that directly relates to the MSW competencies and level that you need. Sometimes that can mean some similar job duties and goals, but oftentimes what that means is your job has to allow you either time away from or in addition to, or projects and client interactions that are above what you're currently doing, essentially. Because if you could do MSW level work, right, then that would make no sense. So they need to figure out what those things are and also allow you to either, again, add time, carve out time, go down to part-time, whatever that looks like. And so we have an employment-based placement webinar recording there. So I would encourage you to take a look at that so you can determine that. And we'll tell you how to apply for that in a second. Is field a class? Yes, 100%. It's part of the credits, overall credits that you'll need to register. So just make sure that you're looking at course planning. Do you need to find your own placement? Definitely not. I will say that there are legal agreements that are required for this space. So we actually discourage you from cold calling anyone. We do this for a couple of reasons. One, we want to make sure that you are covered and that you are protected under our kind of liability legal agreement, affiliation agreements. But we also want to maintain relationships that we have in the community. And so you could think about, let's say, a super popular site and there's 100 of you and then they get 100 calls. We want to be on a good footing with our community partners. And so we kind of have this process to make sure that it's consistent and that we're not inundating them and that we can manage expectations on that side around communication. Can you change your field placements? You can, with the caveat that I'll just say it depends on the reason. And so certainly things come up. We have lots of students who have extenuating circumstances. We absolutely will support you through that. We have lots of resources and support. And so we're happy to talk with you about that. The first step would be to talk with your field faculty about whatever the situation is that would result in a field disruption. I would strongly, strongly discourage you from thinking about going through with a placement, landing a placement, accepting a placement, starting a placement, and then deciding a month in that you want to change field placements. The reason being is you are going to have to start the process all over. And so what that typically means is you will lose that term, you're going to reapply the following term, and then you start in 2 terms. So that's going to delay your graduation. It has financial implications to that. Graduation, again, is kind of disrupted. And so that's why I kind of try to signal and manage expectations here is we're really making sure that you get a viable field placement so that you can graduate and then you can do all kinds of things. The great thing about our MSW is it is a terminal degree that's very versatile. So once you graduate, you can do lots of things. Can you do placement at 2 different locations? No, because I do not have a legal agreement between 2 different entities. So just make sure that you are sticking with the place where we place you because of those reasons. Our practicum placements paid, some of them. So some you'll see in the field application, some of the paid placements will be listed there and you can see what those are. We defer to the field placements. So what I'll say is we cannot demand that a placement, you think about some of these smaller nonprofits or spaces where funding, they can barely even potentially pay or that the grants will last long enough for their own staff. They're not in a position where they could. And so if it comes down to you have to pay them, pay students, then they're not going to offer these really cool placements where students actually get a lot of learning and contribute positively. So it's mutually beneficial. We absolutely talk about paid placements and I encourage placements to do that when I'm onboarding. And so when they offer that, and it's quite a variety, you can discuss that in your interviews and we kind of defer to them in that space. But there, are a lot and you can see that in the field application if that's something that's important to you. I get questions about, I work full-time, how am I going to fit in field? We tried to signal this when you entered this program as that field is going to be a significant amount of time and it is during normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And so that is the expectation. Please be prepared for that. I'm telling you this now so that you can kind of rearrange potentially if you have some arrangements that you need to do now, that you adjust and make some space for, again, at least 2 days a week. Some hospital placements, your first placement actually require you to do 3 days a week your first term. So just be prepared for that. And I'm going to talk about hospital placements later. For those of you who are super interested in psychotherapy, I totally get it. And I only have the placements I have, right? So if there's a finite number of psychotherapy placements, you will interview, but 100% of you are not going to get psychotherapy placements who want psychotherapy placements. The goal is not to come in saying this is the only type of placements that I will accept because that will hold you up. And the longer you are held up, the more rigid you are, kind of narrow you are around field placements, the longer that potentially it's going to take you to get placed, which is going to push you back. And it may have financial implications. So again, we're going to make sure that you have a viable field placement that aligns with your pathway. Think about psychotherapy though, from this perspective, if this is you, who's really interested in this, is again, pop on those and rank them. That's totally fine. But if you don't end up getting that, there are no students who graduate from this program who are ready to open up their private practice independently. So that's just not a thing, right? You have to do your supervision hours. You can't bill independently yet because you're limited license. And so there are lots of post-grad fellowships. There's lots of, actually, Director Woods really supports and provides as much information as we have online around some post-grad opportunities. And you can seek out those things post-grad. So it's not going to limit your ability to pursue private practice after graduation, but our goal is to get you through this program. Can you have an evening and weekend only? So I'm just going to reiterate again, there are some, but it depends on, are they accepting students at the time you need to start field for the amount of semesters that you have? for in the geographic location that you need to be, all of those things have to be true that align with your pathway. And that is very, very few. So I would strongly recommend that you wrap your heads around that field will occur Monday through Friday during normal business hours. Because like I said, we've had some students who said that this is the only way they can do field, and it just isn't possible. We just we don't have the field placements for the most part. All right, field application process. Here are some important due dates. So if you want to take a screenshot or if you want to take a picture, this is really important. The applications will open for you all on September 15th. It will be sent to your UMich email and it will close on September 26th very promptly. I put an October 3rd date as the absolute final date. So essentially any of y'all who do not apply on September 26th are going to get emails and communications from us, and we are going to give you one last chance. And if we don't hear from you from October 3rd, that's it. You're getting pushed to the next term because we can't continue to have people placed because we have to move on to the next step in our placing process, essentially, again, for hundreds of students. So we really need you to make sure that you apply on time. If you have any problems, let us know. But make sure that you just apply within that September 15th to September 26th window. We do offer office hours. So actually starting now, you can walk in our office anywhere from 9 to 11 to 1 to 3 for those of you who happen to be around, or for those of you who are online or just can't make it, you can email our office and they have an open Zoom link and they'll send you the Zoom link and you can connect with someone. I hyperlinked also our website because we also have specific virtual office hours for field apps. So for the 2 weeks that the field apps are open, I have a field faculty, actually at least one, but mostly two, on a virtual meeting, and you can just hop on there. There's an hour every single day that they'll be on there and you can hop on and just ask any questions. You don't have to make an appointment. We're trying to make ourselves as accessible as possible. Not going to go over this too much, but there's lots of hyperlinks. And so once you get these slides, make sure you take a look at the hyperlinks. It's going to talk to you about resume tips, writing assistance, composing your field application, interviewing, preparing to start, all the things. I was a first-gen student. And so what I'll say is a lot of the tips and tricks that maybe a parent of someone who is not first gen could have passed along, or I'm also an only child, so I didn't have any siblings. I didn't know what was going on. And I will tell you that that was really hard for me. And so we try to put things on the website to help, from an equity perspective and inclusive perspective, is just to help level set. If you didn't know, how you're supposed to dress or how you're supposed to prepare for these interviews, we try to put some information there. But if you're nervous, if you have any questions, come to our office. I would love to talk with anyone, or any of the field faculty can come to talk to you about preparing for that, because it can be a little bit, you could be a little bit nervous. That's normal. Your goal statement. I get lots of questions about goal statements. We actually have a writing workshop tomorrow. So that's coming up soon if anybody wants to come hang out, if you happen to be around. But the goal statement, it really is meant, it's not a cover letter. So cover letters you think about are really specific to a job, right? Dear so-and-so, I'm really interested in this and this is why. A goal statement is really meant to be shared potentially with all of your options. And so you're going to want to write it enough to where you don't have to revise it every single time that we send it out, but you want it to be specific enough that it gives them a sense of who you are, what kind of you're hoping to get out of this placement, et cetera. So we put some goal statement guidelines on here, and there is Director Woods oversees the career services. And so Michelle, you're welcome to chime in at any point, but I don't know if you wanted to say some more about this part.
Sure. So the guidelines are very clear in terms of the formatting, gives you suggested or what the format would be for the goal statement. And it also has a couple of questions or prompts for you to discuss in the goal statement. And so you want to follow those directions. And our office will help you once you go through and you create a basic draft. You can contact us by that email address, and we can review your drafts. And so if you come with something that we can work with that is most helpful, and we can review your draft either online or in person. It really depends on what's more comfortable for you. A lot of students will just send us a draft and we will send you back comments. And so if you do that, we prefer the drafts to be sent to us as a non-PDF. And then that way we can make the comments directly on the document and send it back to you. And if we need any discussion from that, we can go from there.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, a little bit more just about, so that was a goal statement and then your
Oh,
resume.
oh.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I forgot to mention that because of the due date for the field application, you don't want to, if you want us to review your draft, you don't want us to send us the request right before your due date because there's so many students who are applying. We may have a lot of drafts to review. So you want to give us at least maybe 4 days or something like that prior to the due date to give us enough time to review it and get it back to you. So not the day before it's due. So
that is important to reinforce. And I would just encourage, on behalf of my colleague, maybe 4 business days, because let them have their weekends. So maybe that also would be, is that okay with you, Michelle?
yeah, that's fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
Good. Awesome. It's pretty amazing that the school has this many resources. I will say my grad school did not. And so I'm really always appreciative of Director Woods and all the support that her office gives. So thank you so much, Michelle. All right, resume. Make sure, please, that you use your UMich email. I know you have maybe your personal resumes for work, but really your UMich email is the one that we're going to be using all the time. And you want to make sure that you're not missing anything from potential field sites. And so please make sure you update your resume with your UMich email. That would be a big part recommendation on my end. Okay, submitting your application. Ready? We are going to send out an email to y'all on the day that it opens, says congratulations, the field applications are open and it's a hyperlink. And when you click on that, it's going to go to a web page that looks like this. You are going to first attest. I know it's really small. You don't have to read everything right now, but basically it's a web-based application. You're going to have to attest that you did several things. One of them is just attending this meeting. So those of you on this meeting, congratulations. You already are a quarter there. You're going to attest to the other things. And so just make sure that you read through these things, guidelines, resume, all the things that we just talked about. And then you're going to keep going. So the first decision that you have in this is a drop down that says, are you interested in an employment-based placement at your current place of work? Yes or no, because really that's the way that the algorithm will take you. Your application will look different if you say yes, and it'll look different if you say no. So just make sure you're pretty clear on whether you want to pursue that or not. So let's talk about non-employment based, because for those of you, that's going to be the vast majority of you, that people who you're seeking a field placement not at your place of work. You're going to select 3 placements. You're going to kind of rank them. What I'll say is don't think too much about the ranking in order, because like I said, it's dynamic. So you're going to tell us the top 3 that you think you would like to pursue, but be ready that all 3 may or may not be available because it depends on all these other factors, right? But we are going to go down the line. So based on your first one, we're going to see if they're available. We will send your materials. If there's 5 other people that also want that number 1, we're going to send all the materials and let them choose. And then basically you just continue through that process until you land a field placement. You will interview, and then you'll be told along the way, again, kind of whether you're accepted or not. And if not, then we'll move you forward. The first time that you go through the field app, I would also highly recommend that you turn off all filters. Just do one pass with no filters. Take a look and see what field placements are listed there, and you're going to see a description. You can click on it and look at their website. As whatever information we have about the field placements will be listed there. The next filter I would tell you is probably by pathway. So you might want to click by pathway and then just filter it for your own specific pathway. The only pathway that field cares about is your primary pathway, not your secondary. So if you want to do a secondary, that's totally fine, but you don't have to find a field placement that matches both. Just go by your primary pathway and you'll be fine. So you're going to rank kind of your top 3, and then there's some additional questions that you'll go through for non-EBP placements. For those of you that want an EBP, you're going to say yes. You're going to make sure that you watch the EBP webinar, and then you're going to search for your current employer, because we actually might have a legal agreement with them. If that's the case, that will expedite things for you. If we do not have a legal agreement, it takes 8 to 10 weeks to get that done. So the onus is on you to make sure that you apply on time and make sure that you give this office enough administrative time to open up a field site if they are open. I also would tell you, though, at this point, if you are even remotely considering doing an employment-based placement, I'm hoping that you've already started, if not start today, engaging your supervisor about this idea. start to think about like, would you be willing to support me in this? This is what it would look like, which is again, allowing you to do MSW level work, either during hours from like, increasing the types of jobs or kind of activities or tasks that you'd be doing, or allowing you to pause your workday potentially to go to a different department in that same organization, and then coming back, right? So you just have to negotiate that with your supervisor. Anthony, I'm going to take questions at the end if that's okay. So just hold on to your question and then I'll make sure to answer that because I want to get through this. And awesome, thanks. And then we'll stop recording too. As far as the placing process considerations, I've talked a little bit about this, so I'll be brief. The agency side, we really need to defer to their availability, their training program cycle. So sometimes people say, but I know that so-and-so takes students. That's true, but sometimes they have a centralized training orientation and they only accept students in the fall. So I can't make students take them. It's also a lift on their end to take students. And so we kind of defer to them around their training program cycle, changes in their funding, of course, and then kind of their previous experience with students, how many students they want to take at the time. And then on your end, what the considerations are is your program schedule, 16-month students versus 20-month. I'll also share that generally speaking, private practices will not accept, and hospitals will not accept 20-month students. You would have to flip. And so you don't have to, there's no pressure on my end, but if you think about by time a psychotherapy space or a hospital onboards you for that first term, they can't have a student then stop like in the middle of that and come back for 2 more semesters. They want client continuity. And so a lot of students who end up wanting certain placements that are hospital or private practice, if you're a 20-month student, you would have to consider moving to 16-month or move on from that placement. Now, the reverse around school placements is true. If you are a 16-month student, but you want a school-based placement, you will likely have to flip to a 20-month schedule because the schools are not, there's not enough work for you all to do to learn in that space during the spring summer term because they take the summers off, right? And so just think about that when you're also thinking about field placements. Considerations. So for those who are not pursuing an EBP, please do not reach out to the agencies directly. Really, it's about maintaining our relationship, but also it's about those legal agreements. And there's certain things in my spiel that I do when I vet agencies that you just wouldn't know, and that's okay because that's not your job. So please defer to us to just make that connection. It generally goes much better when we can kind of broker that for you on your behalf. I am really proud actually that the fact that this field office has enough staffing to do that for you. There are some other programs where it's really go find your own field placement. And so we're really happy that we can kind of walk beside you and with you and partner with you in this space to try to get you a viable field placement. Okay, so you hit submit, then you wait, right? So what happens after this? We will review, the field faculty again will review your materials, and then they may reach out to you with questions. Sometimes there's a field placement that they know they're kind of particular, and so they might reach out to you and say, hey, if you really want this, maybe consider adding a sentence or two around this if you're really interested, and so they might have you to edit it or not. And otherwise, we're going to move forward with your materials. So I talked about the dynamic process a lot. Again, you should hear from us by October 10th. So maybe put that in your calendars and just say, hey, I should hear from the field office by October 10th, assuming that you applied on time. There's some more hyperlinks around here about interview prep, so I'm going to highlight that. But if the agency declines to offer you an interview, we'll move forward. And we'll kind of go to your next option. And if that's not available, we'll keep going. And if that's not available, we'll give you some more options that are still available. If you are offered post-interview, congrats, you'll be all set. And again, we'll talk to you about what that looks like. If you're not offered, we will provide any feedback, like I said before. One thing that I do want to note is I match field faculty by agency because they really have that rapport with the agencies. And so sometimes if you start with one field faculty and you go to another agency, just know you might be working with several people in my office because they're connected by agency, not by student, if that makes sense. So you will get to know maybe several folks in this office, which is okay. All right, we're in the home stretch, everybody. I usually, when I teach classes, I don't talk this much, so I'm really sorry. Hang in there with me. Okay, some additional considerations. Hospital placements. I got a lot of these questions during orientation. We sent out an email. I'm really sorry about the small time change, so I'm going to reinforce it here today. Hospital-based placements, I hyperlink the webinar here today, and you'll get these. But tomorrow on 9/3, for anybody who's interested in Michigan medicine, it is a highly competitive, highly sought out field placement. I'm not hyping it up because I want everybody to be medical social workers. I'm just telling you the reality that a lot of people end up wanting this. And then a lot of people will not get placed there because we just don't have enough placements, right? So because it's competitive, what we do is we have kind of an abridged, expedited timeline for Michigan Medicine so that you're not as much as at a disadvantage if you don't end up at Michigan Medicine. So they're going to tell you all the things tomorrow. It is hybrid. Come join us in person. We'll have snacks if you'd like in the ECC. It's the on the first floor as you walk in, the main kind of conference room, or you can register for Zoom there. It will be recorded. I found out, so I confirmed that. So it will be recorded. And it is from 4:30 to 5:30. I put the wrong time in the first email, but it is 4:30. You can come hang out with us. We'll be there at 4, but it'll be at 4:30 tomorrow. School-based placements, for those of you interested in working in schools, like I said, you'll have to likely be a 20-month student, and you would only be in those schools during fall and winter terms because they take that summer off. So what it looks like is you would start in a school for winter term, but we basically contract with the schools that you would be there for the school year. So you're in field longer than your semester, if that makes sense. And it works out in the end. So you would start field for the winter term in January, but you would go through June, which is when the kids get out of school. But schools often you're not there for 8 hours, you're there like 6.5 hours, 7 hours. You have a lot of school holidays. For those of you in Michigan or in this area, right, we have snow days or we have weather days. And so it ends up being that you spread out your field hours, but it kind of works out because you're not there 8 hours a day. And so I just wanted to note that you're in field through June. That's the expectation for school-based. And we'll adjust your field guidelines based on that. So don't worry about any of that. There are some times though, where when you extend it through June, because you have some different projects or other things at field, you actually can squeeze out enough extra hours to do a field elective. You can use so many field credits as extra electives. There's pros and cons to that. If you use up all your electives in field, then you don't get to take the cool elective classes if you want. But for some, it's more convenient. So if you want to add an extra field credit, my ask is that you really relay that to your field faculty though by the beginning of that term. So by drop add, you should let them know whether you're doing that. Because if you go wait till the very end, nobody knew you were doing those extra hours, those extra projects, right? And nobody was really kind of accounting for that time. So just to be kind of transparent with that process. Disability accommodations, please let us know. Disability accommodations, we have done a lot of work in this office to try to be as inclusive as possible and try to work towards what disability accommodations could look like in field. A lot of people have formal accommodations through this SSD office, and we encourage you to seek out that support if you need it. You don't have to disclose anything to us. We just want to be supportive of seeing what accommodations might translate to field. So things like needing extra time to take tests doesn't necessarily translate into field. So we have a subject matter expert, actually the assistant director, Christina Dadswell, is an expert in this space, and she's often our go-to, but she works very closely with the SSD office. But if you have any accommodations that you think might be worth discussing, we're really open to that and supporting you through that. Field proximity. When I say local, when I say be ready to travel, we're saying be ready to travel 30 to 60 minutes from typically from Ann Arbor or from where you live. And so for those of you on this call, you are mostly what we consider kind of residential or local folks. And so transportation is an expectation on your end for the most part. So asterisks, those of you who do not have a car can note that in the field application, there is a little box that says, I do not have a car, because then that's just going to limit your possibilities, and that's okay. But we want to take that into consideration, right? We're not going to send you to somewhere that's far if you have no car. We do count though buses as a means, like since you have free access to the city buses, at least that go out to Ypsi and go out to Ann Arbor, we consider that an option then. So that's within kind of your radius of where we could be placing you. You also could consider carpooling. So if you have a colleague here, we've known some students who carpool, and that's worked out really well too. So you could also consider that if multiple of you are at the same site. If you find placement is difficult, just know we'll work with you. We're going to continue to partner with you. Just check your emails and partner with us and communicate with us. That's really all we ask. Be open to that feedback, and then we have gotten all of our students placed, I promise, and we'll continue to do so. Reach out to your field faculty if you need anything. If you have any circumstances or just anything new that's come up for you, just let us know. Like I said, we kind of crowdsource things together as a field faculty team. If you are unsuccessful again or refuse really viable options, just know you're going to have a meeting with me, because I want to get you through this process. And so it'll just be a little bit of a check to see how we can support you further. If you're an international student, you will get lots of information about CPT. And I met with a lot of the international students in Seed Week. but there's some additional paperwork, as you all know, for those of you who are international students, so just pay attention to that. Every once in a while, field agencies require letters of recommendation, but I would say generally that's not the case, but every once in a while. And then if you are of undocumented status, please feel free to reach out to OSS if you have not already they can offer any support or guidance around that. You get to pause and you don't have to hear me for a second. So I'm going to pause and hand it over to my colleague, Director Woods, to talk a little bit about this.
Sure. So just going back to the previous slide in terms of letters of recommendation, because sometimes, like you're saying, very few agencies request that. But if you happen to be in an agency where they need that for their HR paperwork, then if you signed off on your right to access your letters of recommendation in your application, you cannot use those for this purpose. So most of you signed off on your right to access those letters. So just keep that in mind. A lot of times our Office of Student Services will get that request and we can't release those letters of recommendation to you. So you want to keep that in mind and just have a couple of people that you can call to write a letter for you, and if you need that, but that's very rare that an agency will request that. So I don't want to alarm anybody, but
thank you so much.
Yeah. But the next slide is more about some of the resources that we have within our Career Services Office. So the first link is to our website where I put together information regarding licensure. And that's important for you as a student to take in consideration what the licensing rules and regulations may be for the state that you want to practice in after graduation, because there are some states that require specific coursework, clinical coursework, and there's some that will require a direct services field placement in order for you to be eligible to get a clinical license in that state. They're few and far between, but they are some. For instance, New York requires 12 credit hours of clinical coursework. So you don't really have to worry about if you're in any pathway. As long as you've taken 12 credit hours of clinical coursework, you're fine. There's no specific type of field placement. But if you're interested in practicing in Florida, Florida wants you to have 24 credit hours of clinical coursework that covers specific areas, and you have to have a direct services field placement. So if you want to be a clinical social worker and you're in a policy pathway, that would be very difficult for you to do in our program and be a clinical social worker in Florida. So one thing is considering what your pathway is, what your goals are when you graduate, but also looking at our website to talk about licensure. It has some information about different states. I have a chart where I list each state, and I also list the different levels of licensure and any specific requirements like courses or field that you might have to take in consideration. So you'll want to review that if you want to practice outside of the state of Michigan anytime that you're, even if it's long after you graduate, it still has implications for your MSW program, some of those states. So look at that and prep for your field to see if there's anything that you need to take in consideration regarding field and courses. And then the Association of Social Work Boards is another resource for you to learn about licensure. They are the clearinghouse for not only licensing rules and regulation, they also create the board exams that are used to pass, to get a license. So some states require a master's exam or a clinical exam, and some states require both. So the Association of Social Work Boards put together the exam. So you want to be familiar with that. You don't have to worry about exams now, but it's just a resource for you. And then our career services office is the place to come to get any of your drafts reviewed. As I was saying, your goal statement and also your resume. You don't have to do a total redo of your resume for field, but you'll want to look at some of our tips and guidelines for putting together the best resume as possible. And we can help you with any questions that you have or reviewing your drafts.
Thank you. And Assistant Director Carrington.
Thanks, Erin. I'll first start by sharing, I saw a couple of questions in the chat. And so as it relates to switching your program, say from a 20-month to a 16-month program, or the 16-month program to the 20-month program, we would ask that you all complete what we refer to as an out-of-sequence petition at this point. That document, it's an electronic form, but that document can be located in the intranet on the School of Social Work website. So without sharing a screen or anything or making things too complicated, if you just go to the School of Social Work website, in the top right-hand corner, there will be a link that says intranet. It will require that you sign into your UMich account. And then you're going to want to look under class-related forms. You should find the out-of-sequence petition there. Similarly, if you are interested in changing your pathway at any point through the field placement process, so let's just say you're interested in a field placement and they only take students from a particular pathway, you are generally welcome to change that, and it's best to do that now, early on in the process, rather than waiting farther down the line. But there is a change of pathway request form in that class-related section as well. There was also a question I saw since I'm discussing it, and Erin, please correct me if I'm wrong. There was a student that asked about whether it's best to change your pathway and or 16 or 20-month program now. Do you have a better chance of getting a field placement if you change now? And I think the answer is no, because the field sites don't necessarily know what your pathway is. They don't necessarily know whether you're in the 16 or the 20-month program, but just be aware that if you apply for a particular program that has those certain requirements and you're accepted, you will be required to then make that change request within our office. So I'll pause there. Okay, Erin,
That is perfect. Yep.
Okay, perfect. And so I also just want to talk a little bit about financial aid considerations regarding field. I'll share, we get a lot of requests within our office as students are going through the field placement process, but also as they start field, not realizing that there are costs involved, especially when you think about the transportation that's involved. As Erin mentioned, you all are responsible for transportation to and from field, which also means that you're responsible for the costs associated with that transportation. So I just wanted to reiterate that again, that it's the student's responsibility to cover costs related to the commute to and from field placement. You are able to utilize financial aid, which would include student loans, work-study funding that you may be receiving, as well as any grants or scholarships to cover these field-related expenses. For most students, this usually requires that you have an excess of financial aid, which means that your financial aid totals more than your tuition and fees. So you generally are looking at receiving a refund in order to have that money in your pocket so that you can put gas in your car or use public transportation if there is a cost involved with that. As Erin mentioned, for those of you that are not aware, if you're local to campus, you do have access to the Ann Arbor Transit Association, so the Washtenaw County bus, essentially, for free, utilizing your University of Michigan ID card. There is a transportation expense built into the overall cost of attendance for all students, which is $200 a semester. And I recognize that Some of you may be paying more than $200 a semester, but it is built into your overall cost of attendance. So the university does acknowledge the fact that most graduate students do have some level of transportation that they're incurring while in their particular program. Obviously, if you find that your expenses exceed $200 per semester, you generally are able to request a budget increase with the University Office of Financial Aid. If you're not familiar with that terminology, you're welcome to reach out to my office directly, and we can help guide you through that process and, you know, whether or not you need to pursue that option or not. And you all may have seen our development office sent an email today regarding our Field Fund campaign. Over the last few years, every semester, the School of Social Work has committed to providing a small amount of money in the form of a field stipend to eligible students. Being mindful that the amount that's allotted for this stipend is minimal. And so I'm just going to use an example. We might be awarded or given or allotted, I should say, $10,000 for the semester. We have an application in which students who are currently in field can apply for these stipends. And we look through to determine students that have the greatest financial need. We also are looking at students that have a significant field-related cost. So when we think about students that are, you know, maybe traveling 100 miles round trip to and from field placement, maybe there are students who they're required to utilize their own vehicle to travel from one site to another, or you're required to conduct home visits using your own transportation. Some students are required to pay a silly amount, and I have heard, you know, kind of outrageous numbers, but for parking, for instance. So those are things that are a little far and beyond, you know, what we would consider the normal commute to and from field. And so just being mindful that $10,000 only goes so far. So not everyone that applies will be awarded this stipend, but it is an option for you. So I do encourage you to apply in any given semester that the stipend is available and you are actually in a field placement. Thank you, Erin.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, hang in there with me and then we'll get to Q&A. So congratulations, you're placed. So let's pretend that everybody has been placed on this and you will get there eventually. So what happens after that? So we do have, again, another link to prepare for your placement. And so you can take a look at that later. We would encourage you, and we will encourage you to check in with your new field instructor just to say, hey, is there anything that I need to do? Do I need to do a background check before I start? Do I need to read any materials as I prepare? Is there anything I can do? Sometimes there's health screening, sometimes there's drug screening, sometimes there's background checks. So just check in with them about some of that. We try to be as transparent as possible around those requirements in the field app if we are aware of them. So we actually ask them, and then when you look at the agency, it'll say, here's the things that are required. Again, it's a little bit if they told us. So if they didn't tell us and then something new has changed, maybe check with them. But and then the last thing that you'll have to do is attend something called a pre-field orientation once you start next term. So we will offer that the next term, and that's going to tell you all the assignments, field assignments. What are you going to need to do to finish that course? Here's some extras. This doesn't apply to everybody, but we get enough questions that we decided to include this. Some of you may want that school social work specialization and certification. So I'm going to list some things here. I will also list subject matter experts at the end because this is not my wheelhouse, but I'll share some things with you. So some of you all want to do this specialization. It really requires you to take certain courses throughout the time. And a lot of people just add this in, so it's kind of nice. So if you ever want this to potentially, you also can pursue this post-grad. So it doesn't mean that if you don't change your mind later that you can't do it, but here's some of the courses that you'll need. The exceptions, you have to do 500 hours though of direct practice with children and youth. And so here's the other thing is mostly that's IP students and children, youth and families students, but occasionally we have some of you all in different pathways that also still want to pursue this, but your field placement is not, they don't work with kids. And so it's not going to be possible for you to get that many hours in your field placement in addition to. So just be mindful of that. Like while you're picking field placements, if you also want to pursue that, that might be a factor for y'all when you rank your field placements. As far as the approval process afterwards, there's this form and a process. You have to look at other states' requirements if you're going to practice in other states. But we have lots of resources for you. So here's some hyperlinks for you. And then as promised, here is the group that are the subject matter experts. Two of these folks are actually field faculty here in the Office of Field Education, and Professor Sherman teaches as a clinical professor here. So all three of them are really incredible subject matter experts and resources in this space. A little bit of advice as you start. So just be patient. Everyone's really eager to start. So just be patient with the process, but also be patient with all that you have to learn. I would say that most of the students who put the most in the field get the most out. So that's true in all my experiences. Seek out opportunities, take initiative. I will say it becomes really good recommendations for you later. But the more that you can do in that space, the better. Of course, within reason, I know that there's limitations and we talk about time boundaries, but if there's opportunities, I will say a lot of students who are more passive learners and are just like, well, I'm going to wait to be told, they just don't tend to get a lot out of field as much. So if you could get a little bit stretch goals or get out of your comfort zone and just ask, hey, how can I help? What do you need? I finished this project. What else is there? I will say that's really well received typically in the field spaces. Learn to function with discomfort, anxiety, and ambiguity. We talked a little bit about Seed Week that discomfort is not the same as harm, right, in spaces. And so people can feel uncomfortable, but it's not necessarily a safety issue, right? And so there will be times where you are absolutely, let's say for those of you in IP spaces, there are going to be some uncomfortable, maybe anxiety producing situations because you're dealing with real folks. And we want to prepare you. The reason why I chose field and to move completely like careers is because I think field is the best aspect of integrating this experiential learning and best preparing you for this next kind of step in your career. Be willing to make mistakes and learn from them. The very first assessment that I did at Cleveland Clinic, which is where I did one of my field placements, I went to go talk to the patient. I came back to my field instructor and they said, did you ask these questions? And I said, no. And they sent me back in, which I thought was really embarrassing. And so I went back in, asked some more questions, came back and they said, well, did you ask these follow-up questions? And I said, no. She's like, you better go back in. And I was like, well, I just went back in. And they're like, no, you have to go back and do it again. But did I remember all those questions the next time? Yes. And so, it's okay. I felt a little embarrassed or I felt like I should have known those things, but it's okay. Like we want this to be a learning experience. And especially for those of you in employment-based placements, we really encourage supervisors, and we actually make it very transparent that we want your EBP for your placement side to be a learning space and not to be seen the same as kind of a supervisory performance issue. All right. And we want you to make mistakes and that's okay. Right. A little bit of advice as you begin. Or one other thing is seek and use feedback. I often ask students who would like feedback to do better, and everybody raises their hand. And then when I give feedback for some folks, it's like, oh, I don't like your feedback. So just be kind of mindful of how you best receive feedback and share that with your supervisor, because I think the more transparent you can be around how you best receive that, the better that relationship will go. Just some final things. I promise Field's a course, so make sure you're looking at your Canvas site. Field faculty really welcomes and expects you to reach out to us. Don't wait. Don't feel like, well, it's not that big of a deal. If you have that feeling that something's going on, please reach out to them. I actually would rather mitigate the situation before it snowballs into something bigger. And then we are really available to hear all the cool things. It's not always negatively framed. What I think is really cool is since I've been here, we've tried to normalize, come into the field office. I will say I have a mini fridge, right now I'm staring at it, of bubblies and Cokes and Diet Cokes, and then I have lots of candy in my office. It's been really cool to get to meet some of y'all on a more personal basis or smaller group, to hear all the cool things that you're doing. Like you all really contribute to a lot of the community spaces and change a lot of cool things. And we try to highlight that at graduation, but I can't get to know all 800 of you all. So if you come to me and stop or make an appointment, I really would welcome that anytime, or come see our field faculty anytime, come hang out in the field office. We're on the second floor. And with that, this is my thank you questions. So I'm going to stop recording and then I'll answer some of your questions that you all have. Why don't you start? I'm going to look in the chat first. And while you're thinking about it, raise your hand. The raise hand function will go in order of that. So thanks, Kelly, for starting that. So let me stop the recording.